Hello everybody and welcome back to the channel for an emergency broadcast. Today we're having a look at Varuna Initial Reaction Division, one of the old sectorials very recently added back into N5. Veruna were one of my personal favorite sectorials. I really loved their sectorial leaning into kind of the oceanic aspect of PanOceania, and they were quite a nice force that were very easy to collect, with a very small roster list, where you could get a Varuna collection going pretty easily, and it was pretty easy to get good solid Veruna lists on the table without having to get too much or track down any rare models or anything like that. So I'm very happy to see them return, and I'm very happy to see their playstyle and some of their unique things from N4 be carried over into N5. So what defines Veruna? In N4, they were really known for a very powerful core link that was slowly nerfed over the edition. With this core link, you'd usually end up taking 3 or 4 Fusiliers, top it off with a Kamau, and then you'd have a pretty good sniper. Maybe you've got a Kamau HMG or a Fusilier HMG backing that up, but that was sort of your starting point. And from there, you'd look at expanding out your sort of defensive mix, mainly with Helots being a big draw, AVA3 Helots, being the Neurosynetics little fish guys. Veruna always had the highest availability of Helots, and was really using them as sort of prime defensive pieces. They did, however, suffer from a lack of close assault, or a way to push into the opponent's face. You did have Knights of Montesa, and you did have stealth orcs with boarding shotguns, but really, this wasn't as effective of a way to get in your opponent's face as something like Svalheima and the tools they had access to. But you'd still make do, and it was a pretty fun way to play the game in a very fun faction. In N5, they've had a pretty decent rework to how their fire teams work, and some key unit tunings. So they've got a number of fantastic duos and keywords they can put together that really do feel N5 ready, in a sense. And they're excelling in the hacking game for a Pano faction. Now, are they the best hackers in Pano? I would say probably no. I think there's another returning sectorial uh, that's taken that crown, but they're pretty close to it. In N5, having access to pitchers, even burst 1 pitchers, on a high ballistic skill unit, as we'll see, is, well, we'll discuss it more when we get to it. But having access to those kind of tools, and very good, essentially, network extension, and decent quality hackers, Veruna are able to play actually quite a good network game, in a similar sense to how military orders can put out a good network with Peacemakers, similar to how Phoenix can kind of extend that network. Veruna is now taking this a step further, where they can take the initial setup elements that military orders can do well with a network, and then combine that with the extension we've been able to see from a faction like Kestrel into the sort of new, quite advanced hacking for what a lot of people would consider PanOceanian, and that's a bit of a pattern we can see across some of the new returning sectorials. We've had some key unit shakeups, mainly the Orcs. The Varuna Division Orcs have returned, but in quite spectacular fashion. And Kamau have sort of kind of become refocused as, a key medium infantry, not just in their guns, now in their sort of tech and other profiles. But we've still got Helots, and Helots have sort of been molded into the faction in a way where they can now also function sort of like Helots do in vanilla, where you still have Patsy as a fireteam master, you still keep Helot FTOs, so Helots are still a big part of your game plan. So, without further ado, let's go to Army and take a look at what we've got to offer. Alright everybody, so here we are in Infinity Army 7, with the Varuna Immediate Reaction Division Fire Teams chart. So, you've still got unlimited duos, a Haris, and a core, but the fire teams themselves have been pretty heavily reworked. The first fire team here, which used to just be essentially your Fusilier's fire team, has been renamed your Veruna fire team. It now has the capacity to duo, and you can also now form the team off of a Helot FTO. So, you could build the team not just off a Fusilier, you could build the team of, say, a Helot and 2 Kamau, for example, and that's a pretty nice way to build it. You've also got in the fire card section several units that count as Helot or Fusilier, so you can build teams that way as well in a pretty flexible way. Having duo capability is quite nice, but I don't necessarily see you wanting to just duo these units. I think just having two Fusiliers or two Fusilier keyworded models probably isn't going to get you incredibly far. Maybe your most tempting option is Quinn with just a normal Fusilier. Quinn's had a little bit of a change. We'll get to him later. And just gluing two Helot militiamen together, I don't think is quite doing what you want it to do. But it's still interesting as a very easy way to build off of a Helot as a fire team as an option is quite cool, as you can take the Helot as the glue and then sort of build a useful duo off of that glue, not including the Helot in it, for example, and kind of have that Helot as that defensive element, or that element you tuck up the board like we see happen in vanilla, where usually you'll see, Joan, a couple Helots, or maybe another unit just sort of dragging a Helot around. I think that's the kind of links you're going to see coming out of the Varuna fire team, is quite good Harises built off of Helots, or a return to the Fusilier core, maybe. Though N5 hasn't really been about making a big core, I can see you sort of bringing back a big Fusilier team, sort of in the way that Kestrel does, where in Kestrel you've got a lot of tech that makes it worthwhile taking all of those Fennec Fusiliers. You don't quite have that in Veruna, but you don't have as strong of a, essentially, command package in Veruna as you do in Kestrel, where actually you'll end up taking a Fusilier Lieutenant a decent amount of the time. That'll be Lieutenant and Decoy. You take a Kamau Sniper, and suddenly, if you just fill out those next two slots, that's a core team. So, next up, the Undertow fire teams. This is sort of a reworking of the kind of Orc Kamau team from Veruna previously, but again, it's been reworked to include this really handy keyword of Undertow. So your Varuna Orcs, your Kamau, and your Knight of Montessa's FTO, and now keeping in mind, this isn't the motorized Knights of Montessa, this is the on-foot Knights of Montessa FTO, all have the Undertow keyword. So you either need one Orc and one Kamau, and then you can build the team off of that. And again, you do have some keywords, one keyword exactly, for the Undertow team in your wildcards. And from there you can build out that duo or that Harise team. Veruna Orcs are really, really quite good, as are Kamau, and I see the Undertow fire team really as the primary fire team you're going to be building with Veruna in N5. We've seen this meta evolve that's really about what's the best duo you can put on the table, and I think with the Undertow fire teams, you can put quite effective and juicy duos on the table. Now, it doesn't have the Undertow keyword, but the Machinist comes with the Kamau keyword, and we kind of see in the general design of PanOceanian factions your medium infantry guns getting that keyword with the factional engineer with a factional modifier. We're still seeing that here. Uh, Veruna generally likes a little bit of remotes. They like a Peacemaker. They're probably going to appreciate a Thunderbolt TR bot, as you'll be able to see in a second. They can link up a Bulletteer pretty easily. So taking that machinist, it's not bad. You used to do it quite often in N4, where it was just a numbers game to get a Harise team up. But here, where Kamau's have been significantly reworked and are really quite good, I don't know if you're going to see them as much. So next up to the cavalry fire teams. These haven't really changed, other than that the Squallow is gone and been replaced with the Squallow Mark II. The Mark II, it's a fantastic tag. The original Squallow, it's a bit of a classic, but if you're just looking at what's improving your game plan, I think the Squallow Mark II is a better tag, just being on that smaller base. Beautiful. It's got some quite nice link options, uh, including just being able to duo to Squallow, which is always funny. But you've kind of got a bit of a really good opportunity here with the Squallow Mark II, just to slap it in similar duo to what you see in Kestrel sometimes, which is just slapping a Pathfinder drone bot on here. Having the Pathfinder drone bot as a wild card, and note it's not an FTO. You can add on the TAC-aware drone bot, is really quite strong. With the Squallow with an NCO, between these two units, you're looking at access to about 5 orders. If you're including the order they bring, the TAC-aware and the NCO, and that's been historically seen already to be quite a strong mix when it comes to setting up your tag. 2 motorized Knights of Montesa, quite good. It's a really nice duo that works in military orders quite well. And we've also kind of seen military orders that paramedic profile used to be exclusive to MO. It's been brought over to Veruna now, which is really great. And then Ford Montesa fire teams letting you link the Knights of Montesa FTOs. They've had a bit of a rework, and we'll get to that when we do, but just being able to link them is quite nice. And now also noting, it specifically calls out Knight of Montesa, not the FTO. So this really is the forward Knights of Montesa as the link team name would describe. So in wildcards, Pathfinder drone bots with a max of 2. It's interesting just to be able to strap 2 TAC-aware drone bots to anything and sort of take that off to the races, sort of similar to the Gwylos in Shashvasti. It's somewhat of an expensive and slot-intensive way of getting a burst bonus, but Pathfinders, Pathfinders with TAC-aware are just such solid units. I don't necessarily think you mind doing that. You can take the Clipper FTO. I think it not being the guided version, that's probably not an option you're going to take. And then you've got the characters. So Quinn, Uma, and Patsy. Quinn and Patsy have changed significantly since their last outing in Veruna, and definitely have their place. Uma, still not quite sure. So let's take a look at some of the profiles. So here we see our beautiful Helot, AVA 3, which is unique to Veruna. And it's kept all the new profiles and profile setups, where we've got the 3 FTO versions and the 4 camo versions. Now, what I think you'll see fairly often is 1 or 2 linked Helots, and then potentially another Helot sort of off to the side, depending how many irregulars are running. They're still great pieces. Having the sort of sensor with a high burst weapon, or just the very kind of cheap, let's make some noise, submachine gun light rocket launcher, really great to link. Otherwise, you can never really go wrong with the camouflage Helots. Great little units. Next up, the Fusiliers. So as I mentioned, Fusiliers are really going to be your main bread and butter in terms of a command structure, where you don't have chain of command or anything like that. Your other lieutenants are hackable or vulnerable in other ways, so you still will usually see, 2 Fusiliers taken. It is a very unique opportunity with this little Haris team here, just to set up, lieutenants, decoy, and then just take your Helot of choice. And that's a very nice little defensive link that can defend your DZ or an objective sort of at the halfway line. So that's a good way to utilize, this Helot availability in your fire team. But again, as we sort of go along, it's cool to keep in mind that you can be taking 2 Varuna Orcs or 2 Kamau in a duo, kind of as an undertow fire team, and just strap a Helot sort of on the back of that. So do keep that in mind when you're seeing these other units, that these kind of 3 key fire teaming units of Fusilier, Kamau, Orc can always have a duo where you just slap a Helot on the back of that. And that's really powerful. If you're sort of, developing your pieces, and Veruna sort of develops a little bit slower than some of the other PanOceanian sectorials, just because they don't have, a heap of movement. They're pretty worried about hacking. They don't have that, burst movement with close assault. Just being able to slowly develop, dragging up a Helot, that's going to be pretty powerful. So we get to a pretty key unit here in the Kamau amphibious intervention teams, and this is sort of your key medium infantry for the faction. They've been changed a little bit to have move 6-2, which is really nice, sort of upping the speed there. and also meaning they synergize really nicely with the Orcs, where now they're all moving at the same speed. So Kamau have always been quite good, just on the basis of being very slimmed down, in a sense, and very lean for what they do. Just being BS13 with mimetism, and not spending too much on things like armor or bloated gear, historically has been where Kamau, have really shined. So taking a look at their profiles, we can see that an EM carbine has sort of been strapped, and a silenced pistol. Everyone's got a silenced pistol. An EM carbine has been strapped to a few different profiles. But overall, if you're just looking at raw points cost, they're still pretty lean for what they do. So, you've got the basic Kamau and the Kamau Lieutenant, who just carry a combi rifle and EM carbine. I found EM weapons to be really quite strong in my experience playing ISS, especially where heavy infantry has become very popular. But that EM weaponry can let you down if sometimes you just do need to kill something, or if there's a war core giving you trouble or something like that. An EM carbine's not going to do much for you. So having this option to be shooting with the combi rifle with lethal rounds or an EM carbine against a harder target really means that these Kamau are never going to come up against something they can't do something against, which is quite strong. And EM carbines, in a fire team, they're burst 3, sort of just enough to get you over the line in a gunfight. But I don't think you're going to see either of these profiles very much, just because you've got so much other great stuff going on. So in terms of SWIC weapons, you've got 3 options. You've got the heavy machine gun, the MSV-1 light rocket launcher, and the MSV-2 multi-sniper. Now, out of these options, the heavy machine gun is a pretty obvious pick just for active turn shooting. Linked up with 5 dice, you've got mimetism in a meta where you're really not seeing as many MSV ARO pieces. This Kamau with the HMG, it's just going to be spraying everywhere, and at a really cheap price point as well. Veruna is a faction that is pretty SWIC hungry, and wants to buy as many big guns as it can, and wants to pack in things like hackers as well. So having it just be one SWIC is really nice, and just being able to do a quick duo with the Kamau and another Kamau with the heavy machine gun is a really easy way to get quite a high quality gun going. With the 6-2 movement, you're being able to push up the board and develop one of your specialists while you do it. Great little piece. Now, the multi-sniper, great both offensively and defensively. Mimetism and MSV has always been a strong combination. I think even more so now in N5, where, again, you're not seeing that many MSV2 pieces on Arrow, where you're benefiting from mimetism, and essentially the best factions, like, Combined Army, like Bakunin, they've always got some kind of mimetism in their ARO setup, so having access to this multi-sniper is really quite strong. Then you kind of get to the ugly duckling here, which is the heavy rocket launcher. It's significantly cheaper than something like the multi-sniper if you're looking for an ARO piece, but I just don't think it really cuts the cheese. Multispectral visor level 1 feels like a bit of a liability with all the white noise running around. I think it would have potentially been more interesting if it didn't have MSV, where you could take the HRL, the sniper, then a tech piece, and sort of decide which to put up based on, does my opponent have white noise or not? Now, that's not the universe we live in, so we won't really worry about that, but I just think only having the MSV1 against the MSV2, I don't know, it doesn't feel great to me. Also, just being locked to that burst 3, while you do have mods to offset that, no opportunity to outrange with that is a little bit rough, and I would really look at just upping the 3 points and getting the HMG, but it's not it's not unplayable by any means, just not the one I'd be going to immediately. So let's take a look at sort of more of the tech pieces. So you can grab the HMG, you can grab the multi-sniper, let's see what you can slam it with. The first one's really interesting, which is the hacker, who is really very cheap for what he is. Kamau have always been quite good hackers, just being Whip 13 with BT 6, and very easy to link with firewalls, as well being the Varuna Division Orcs. So, it's packing a submachine gun, and we've kind of seen a pattern of this in N5, where we've been stripping guns from hackers, giving them some machine guns just to lower that cost a bit. But the exciting bit is they've picked up a fast panda, which is one of the new key tools for network projection. So if you're moving up the field with your heavy machine gun, you've got 6-2 movement, you take a couple fights, then you can run 6 forward and somewhere in cover and just chuck out a fast panda 8 inches past that. That's really quite strong. So, I think it's an absolutely fantastic piece, especially considering it can be under a firewall, where that BTS6 is going to get up to 9. That's going to make hacking you a pretty big pain, and also protecting other members of your link team who, can absolutely be orcs is really valuable. So I think the reworked hacking profile, I think it's a bit of a game changer, and it's also, I think, quite cheap for what you're getting as well. So that's really fantastic. Next up, we've got a tactical awareness paramedic. So the tactical awareness, it's a really interesting element because otherwise I don't really think you'd be looking at running a paramedic Kamau. But the tactical awareness gives you just a little bit, I don't know, just a little bit of a draw here, where if you're taking an aggressive team, like potentially some orcs you want to do a close assault with a boarding shotgun, uh, or if you're taking something like the heavy machine gun Kamau, where you do need to make the effort to get into a decent range, potentially the Kamau is something you're going to look towards. And sort of towards the end of N4, you saw with Svalheima, you can make very kind of tack-aware soup lists with blade ops, and I can see potentially something similar happening here with Kamau paramedics and your two pathfinders as well. So that's quite an interesting piece. Again, I don't know. It's hard looking at a piece like this because you're comparing it to the submachine gun and also to our next profile, which I think is excellent, which is the triangulated fire forward observer sensor. I think this piece is astoundingly good. Triangulated fire with a multi-rifle when you've got mimetism neg 3 is really quite strong, especially if you're in a fire team. It's essentially, it's pretty damn close to just a HMG at that point. Okay, and so it's got the sort of main gun potential where you can absolutely just rely on it to shoot, shoot, shoot. The most awkward thing is going to be getting in that firing position in the first place, as you're likely just going to have to dodge into it, which is quite annoying. But otherwise, it's got sort of a potential just to be a quote-unquote main gun that's going to do pretty decently. But then it's also got all this other tech, like being a forward observer for missions. And in this season where we're seeing no specialist bonuses, it doesn't really matter what kind of thing you are. So while you would usually want to be a hacker for the mission bonus in previous seasons, that's no longer really the case. You can just happily be a forward observer and sort of go that way. The sensor, it's just a nice touch as well. It means you can do some of the classifieds. It means you can kind of sweep an area if you need to. So yeah, I think this little piece is really great. I think the ability, I think if you're not taking the hacker, or if you've already taken the hacker and don't have essentially more hacker slots in your list, taking the Kamau Forward Observer is going to be your tech piece of choice to add on the back of your main gun. I could even see if you're running a really swick heavy list, just duoing two Kamau Forward Observers with each other, and that genuinely being really effective. Like no joke. So I really, really like what they've done with the Kamau here. All of the guns feel like they have a place, even if the heavy rocket launcher is a bit so-so. And these three tech pieces are all fantastic. But I personally would be really leaning towards this hacker, which is really amazing. But of course, look, you've got limited headroom for hackers in a list. But then this Kamau Forward Observer, I think is just, I think it's just beautiful. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. So before I stand here all day talking about the Kamau, let's move on to the Echo Bravo Rapid Reaction Unit. So these guys have changed a little bit in that they've picked up a decoy with surprise attack. It's nice just getting surprise attack on that first attack you do. In a really desperate situation, you can also just try and sort of, walk on and hope your opponent picks the wrong one if they arrow. But it's also a really nice tool just for mind clearing as well. You don't necessarily have to put that decoy, you know, necessarily right next to the Echo Bravo. You can give it a bit of room, kind of use it to detonate a mine that's a bit forward of where the Echo Bravo deploys, and give it some room to move, which is quite nice. So we've kept all the profiles here, the light rocket launcher, and we've picked up a boarding shotgun +1 burst, just because again we don't get that template. And this is a really nice little unit just for murder. The Red Fury's here too, but I think the SWIC cost is pretty prohibitive. As I mentioned before, Veruna is a very SWIC-hungry faction. And that's just because, as a PanO faction, you want a lot of guns, and you don't necessarily have a lot of low SWIC guns outside of jamming a bunch of Kamau or some more aggressive Zulu-Cobra. So I think the Red Fury, it's probably out of your reach, just SWIC-wise, but still cool. Then we've got what was sort of the classic one you'd end up taking, which was the combi rifle, light shotgun, wild paramedic. It's a tad expensive, and just being a parachutist, you don't have combat drop, which means you don't have super jump. Uh, so I think it's probably a little bit expensive for what it does, but having a non-hackable option that can really get in close quite quickly is something that's a significant gap in Veruna. So they do appreciate uh, the Echo Bravo just being an option, and sometimes you absolutely will take it. Then finally, the Combi Panzerfaust. You didn't really see it in N4. I don't really think you're going to see it here either. I just think your other hackers have gotten so much better, where this hacker's just sort of stayed the same. You're much more likely to just be taking Kamau, but in an Akale interference, I could see you taking it. Maybe, not convinced. Next up, another unit that got one very notable change that sort of changed the game a bit for Veruna. It's the Zulu-Cobras. AVA3, which is quite nice, and they've picked up some of their old profiles that you could that didn't get ported to vanilla in N5, namely the Lieutenant Triangulated Fire Sensor Combi Jammer Assault Pistol, who's sort of next to the Fusilier was your other main lieutenant choice, and is still quite a good lieutenant choice, just having your lieutenant under a marker state who can defend himself all right and make a move in a pinch. That's a great little lieutenant to have, especially if you're not wanting to waste the room in a list on taking a Fusilier and a decoy. The Zulu's really great for that, and I could potentially see the Zulu becoming the primary lieutenant for Veruna in some ways, where it's sort of, part of N5 really is a slots game in terms of list building. So, we've got the Spitfire and EM mine with assault pistol. This is just a really nice sort of all-around assault unit. You've had a little bit of a SWIC drop. The Spitfire's picked up an assault pistol and an EM mine, which is really nice. Sort of a pretty good holistic assault unit. And really, you don't have an incredible amount that fires in the Spitfire range band. Sort of an opposite problem to military orders, where you're really looking at the Zulu-Cobra or a Bulleteer Spitfire in terms of that medium range gunfighting. So it's quite a nice piece to have. Then Triangulated Fire, Combi Jammer Assault Pistol in the non-lieutenant version. This is a great piece. The Jammer is sort of a big ward and is very useful in a lot of sort of attack or kind of defensive missions and setups. And then again, Triangulated Fire, it's been reworked where you can really make good use of it with the camouflage, as you can get into that Triangulated Fire firing position a hell of a lot easier. And then look, with the assault pistol, as long as they're within 24 inches, you can just assault pistol them down, and that's really handy. Otherwise, the combi goes a bit longer, and that's great. Now, the star of the show here is the Killer Hacker. Now, the Zulu-Cobra Killer Hacker is really your primary killer hacker in faction, and you'd always be taking one in your Veruna lists, but now you're doing even more so, where they've picked up a pitcher. Now, it's important to note that this is only a burst 1 pitcher. You cannot give a Zulu-Cobra a link team bonus, and they're only BS13. BS13, when you're rolling a die, that's a 65% chance. That is not quite reliable. But nonetheless, having access to a picture is a really, really big deal. Your network can, suddenly sort of go out and zap something really quite well. Because Veruna, it can set up a good network itself, but it really does struggle against an opponent's network, especially if your opponent has a combat instinct hacker. So the ability just to scalpel one hacker and your opponent's link or list is really, really valuable. You used to do this essentially by using Croc Men to deliver a deployable repeater. But that was, quite order intensive, and Crocmen aren't cheap. So essentially, just having this unit you're already taking, sort of pick up this tool that, look, even if you do have to spend the 2 orders getting the picture down, you've still saved a lot more orders compared to the old way of doing things, which was running up a Crocman. So look, I do think this is a game changer. I do think this is an absolute game changer for Varuna. And we've seen also in Vanilla has also picked up the picture profile. It's not unique uh, just to Veruna. They've also picked up a different picture profile that maybe you take that instead, but we'll talk about that another time. So, cannot understate how big of a deal the picture is on the Zulu-Cobra, and I think you're going to see a Zulu-Cobra killer hacker. You saw it in every list anyway, but I think you're just doubly going to see it now. Forward Observer never really had a place. You pay 2 more points, you get the killer hacker, and I think that's staying the same. And then they've sort of reworked the marksman rifle. So it used to have this marksman rifle X visor. It's now been upped to a multi marksman, which is a really significant upgrade. But you are sort of getting costed zero point 0.5 SWIC because you've also picked up Mine Layer and EM Mine. But EM Mines next to Cyber Mines, I don't know. I I still think EM Mines are probably the best mine. Some people are saying, it's probably Cyber Mines. But I still think EM Mines are fantastic. Even just being able to obfuscate, even just having a bit of obfuscation is really nice too. Kind of previously, you could just look at a Veruna deployment and know exactly what all the camo markers are. Just having this be a little bit of obfuscation is really nice. And again, you don't have a huge amount of things that can engage in a Spitfire range band, so not paying the whole SWIC for it, getting a little bit of a defensive equity with that EM mine, and having that multi marksman, really quite nice. Uh, you know, there is a big difference between burst 3 and burst 4. There's a big jump there in terms of effectiveness, but I think if you're getting surprise attack, you're getting your mimetism. Hopefully, you're neg sixing something. The multi marksman rifle's probably just barely okay. Trauma Docs, you're never really going to take. You've got Bipandra. And then Machinists. So, you've got your Varuna Division Machinists as your only option for the Machinists, where they pick up Stealth and Mimetism -3. And the Varuna, I guess, upgrade in a sense, is probably the best of the upgrades. Suddenly, BS12, you don't want to shoot with that. BS12 with Mim 3, suddenly, if someone's within 16, you're pretty happy to take that gunfight. And look, I think these guys are pretty nice to drag around, get an aggressive turret placement somewhere in a key location for a mission. That's really great. Nothing bad to say about the Machinists. But it'll be interesting to see, you know, you can take 17 to 20 points for one of these guys in a pure duo with a Kamau. But is that going to beat out the tech profiles the Kamau have now? I really don't think so. So I think it's a fine take, but I don't think you're going to take them an incredible amount of the time. Deck Bs, still the same. Nice little pieces. Will buff up your Squallow or your Cutter, God forbid. They're fine. Bipandra is the same as she is in Kestrel. She has kept the Fusilier tag as well. So you can put up sort of a I don't know, I guess sort of a Kestrel we have at home, where you can take like Fusilier Bipandra and an Orc for your buck and have that be a decent little team. Like, yeah, maybe Fusilier Hacker Bipandra as the Doctor and then an Orc. That's, I don't know. She doesn't fit into the environment quite as well as she does in Kestrel, where she doesn't really have any good pure duos or anything like that. If she had like the Undertow or the Kamau keyword, you know, I think she'd potentially have more of a place. but I just really don't know where she's going to fit in the Veruna context. Maybe even as a solo doctor. I could see her as a solo doctor, just because again, your Kamau, they're one wound, they are quite squishy, but they're very important to your game plan. So I could see just having Bipatra around as a doctor with a Palbot, potentially being the way to do it. Now Richard Quinn has picked up a second profile with a disco bowler, which is really nice. Uh, Essentially, he puts down the marksman in his multi-rifle, just gets a regular multi-rifle, and gets a disco bowler. This is a really nice tech piece, just to strap, just to get that little bit of vision control, and it's quite reliable vision control as well on BS13. So I don't think you're going to see him in a Fusilier team necessarily as much, but definitely the little Kamau duo he can put up of just some kind of gun and that disco baller with a complementary range band, I think is quite nice. But again, he does have a lot of competition uh, between the hacker and between that really nice sensor forward observer triangulated fire. I think he probably beats out the paramedic in terms of what sort of tech piece are you taking. And yeah, look, I don't really think you don't see the multi-marksman a huge amount in other factions. I don't think you're going to see it a huge amount here either. I don't think that changes. But having this disco bowler access, really quite nice, especially with the duo capability. He's sort of similar to Konstantinos in that sense, but where Konstantinos doesn't really have any good duos that can make cheap, easy use of that disco bowler, uh, I think Richard Quinn definitely does. Warcore is a Warcore, such as a Sucha. I guess on a note with Varuna irregulars, you are usually taking at least two Helots, and if you're not taking Patsy, who we'll cover a little bit later, that can put a bit of a strain on your essentially irregular count. So you're not going to see Warcores or such as much, is going to be my guess, but that'll remain to be seen. All right, then Captain Uma Sworson has her FTO profiles, has her forward deployment profiles. Again, she's not really taken a huge amount uh, elsewhere, and I don't think she's going to be taking a huge amount here. Um, yeah, I mean, look, the forward deployment's cute. Uh, the FTO's cute, but you're spending a lot of points for, you know, for this same cost here. You can take one of the really good Kamau profiles, and I don't think she's beating that. And next up, we have the Orcs, who are back in a really big way. So the Orcs, the Varuna Division Orcs, are back. They cost a point more than just the vanilla Orcs. Not that you have the option to take vanilla Orcs, but for the privilege of 1 point, you pick up Stealth, which is really nice, being able to sneak past enemy repeater networks and getting close with a multi-rifle or a +1 burst boarding shotgun. Really, really nice. But also huge is they've picked up Warhorse. Now, this is great. You're not getting affected by BS attack neg 3, but the bigger deal is you can't be isolated, which is a massive stress off of the Orcs back. The best someone can do now is carbonite them, um, which, you know, they've got firewalls too. You can take a good hacker to help defend against that. Carbonite is not as strong of a hacking program as Oblivion is. So I think that's massive. That's absolutely massive. I think you're going to see Orcs really, really quite a bit. When you're building, because Veruna, it has a very small list in terms of units, so you're usually taking a lot of, a decent bit of Orcs, decent bit of Kamau, and I think you're going to see quite a lot of Orcs. Then being able to give essentially, these Warhorse units strap an easy firewall to it. They can very easily link with, quite a high quality hacker in the Kamau, and you're probably taking that over their native hacker, uh, unless you're not wanting to burn your hurry slot. But I think, yeah, pretty good way to burn your hurry slot is taking a Kamau hacker, either the Feuerbach HMG, and then either the multi-rifle or boarding shotgun Timbot, and that's going to set you up really well. I think, yeah, I think this is a really amazing change. Um, Orcs just being very reliable units who were sort of just always vaguely felt a little bit when you put them on the table. I can really see Stealth and Warhorse, two, two very key skills, pushing them over the line here. So big ups for the Orcs. Very, very cool. Next up, the Motorized Knights of Montesa. You've come back getting access to all their profiles, which is really nice. This, kind of along with the Orcs, used to be the way you'd actually do your close assault, but were usually held back by not having stealth. I think now in N5 you can scalpel out, hackers a little bit easier with the Fast Panda and with the Pitcher, but I don't know. Just with them not being able to dismount anymore, I think using them as pure assault units, I don't know, isn't necessarily as good as it used to be, where you can sort of drive up, do some shooting, but then if someone's on a building, and Infinity, as a game that's known to have buildings, you're going to be kind of stuck. So I don't know. I think really you're taking these guys as a fast specialist and an escort with, say, the multi-rifle and boarding shotgun. I don't know if you can justify the Red Fury just on Swit cost in Veruna, but still, I don't know. Pretty decent. It's just that the dismounting rules changing, I think, really screws them. Now, for a model who's gotten a bit of a rework, is the kind of on the ground Knight of Montesa. So these guys sort of got released at the start of N5. Everyone sort of looked at them and said, why the hell would I take that? So they've given them a nice little rework. The first one, and the big thing, BS attack +1 special die. So this is going to count, both inactive and reactive, which is really nice. And it's got some weapons that really are going to benefit from this special die. You've got Impetuous and Limited Cover, but you've got Mimetism Neg 3. So you're sort of balancing yourself out there against anything that doesn't have a visor. And then you've got a few different options. So the first one we'll talk about is the FTO. Now this is the one you can take with the Undertow fire teams, is exactly this profile here, no other profile. So you get a paramedic, which is really nice as a specialist, boarding shotgun, blitzen, medkit, and boarding pistol. So what this is going to mean is you've essentially got a burst 4 boarding shotgun in the same way, the Orc does, for example. But having this extra special die on this really nice, just sort of forward running unit, suddenly you're not having to rely necessarily on that Orc boarding shotgun +1 burst. You can very happily run up with the regular boarding shotgun. And if you have this guy as the tip of your spear, you pass the turn. If someone comes around the corner on your Knight of Montesa FTO, they're copying a burst 3 boarding shotgun back. Now, usually the way Infinity tables is set up, an opponent can pretty reliably peek a corner, keeping cover themselves while stripping you of your cover. So this limited cover, not necessarily an issue. And having that Mimetism -3, hopefully you're putting your opponent on flats while you're going to be 3 dice on 16s on arrow. That's absolutely fantastic. The Orcs synergize really nicely with the Knight of Montesa as well, being able to give it a Tinbot, or being able to protect it with a hacker. Same thing with the Kamau, being able to protect it with a hacker. Or honestly, I could see you just running these guys essentially as a free range Teutonic Knight, as you would in military orders. They're not as fast, but just being 20 points is it's really cheap. It's really cheap. So I think actually the Knight of Montesa FTO is a really fantastic little piece. This change has also been ported over to military orders as well, where you can take these kind of revitalized Knights of Montesa. So onto the forward deploying profiles, and I will note this is something I'm critical of. I'm very critical of forward deploying heavy infantry without any marker state. I think it's just too risky for them to get hacked, or even just for someone to put a picture, you know, against the piece of terrain in front of them, and suddenly unpicking them or moving them becomes a nightmare. So I don't like forward deploying HI, that's just me. But being able to slap together a pretty nice duo of Red Fury and boarding shotgun, not terrible. But I just think this 20-point profile is absolutely outstanding, and really patches a gap that Veruna had, which was that close assault. Now, it's still hackable close assault. It doesn't have stealth, like your Varuna Orcs do, But I mean, I can still just see again taking these as free range Knights of Montesa. Fantastic. So we've kept the Patsy profile from Vanilla, and she's essentially kept her Fireteam Master Helots. So what you can do is you can take a Helot or two Helots as the basis of a Fireteam. You can slap Patsy on there from the wild cards, and suddenly get that little Haris team of Patsy and two Helots. You can do that in Vanilla. You'd much rather do it with Joan in Vanilla. But you could do that and then also slap other bits and pieces on it. So you could even go something like Helot Patsy Kamau HMG, or you can expand that out into a bigger core. And maybe this is a reason to be taking a core, where you can take two Helots, you can take Patsy, you can take a Kamau HMG, or Kamau Sniper, and then, maybe by Pandra if you like. And suddenly that's actually quite an interesting way to build out a core. Or you just leave, by Pandra at home. You take that as a 4-person core. I think that's quite interesting. Patsy is still, you know, pretty expensive for what she does. You can always put her up on ARO with that emitter as a really nice piece. But again, just sort of an awkward mix of stuff where she really does want a different main gun to kind of push up with. And Helots are not that. So you're in a pretty interesting position where you can build really nice Haris teams. I think it's worth testing whether or not, maybe a 4-person core can work. It's also a little bit awkward where she has the undertow keyword, but the Orcs and Kamau in the Veruna fire teams don't carry the undertow keyword, and she doesn't have the Orc keyword like she does in vanilla. So when Patsy is with the Helots here, she's not really there as a basis for a bonus for these funky fellas, which means, if both of your Helots go down, suddenly you're not getting a burst bonus, which is a little bit annoying. But that's all right. It'll be interesting to see how she fits in. I generally do like Patsy. I think she's quite good, but she's not a you can just sort of plug and play. She takes a bit of finesse and she takes a little bit of building around. So next up, the beautiful, beautiful Cutter. This guy again is just his vanilla profile. Nothing's really changed here. Great piece. Veruna can support him quite well. Nothing much to say there. All right, then we go on to the Squallow. Again, I think really, just having this be doable with a Pathfinder drone bot is going to be really, really nice. Also being able to do it with something like Quinn, just to shoot out, some disco ballers when you need it. Otherwise, a motorized Knight of Montesa, another Squallow, or a Kamau are all pretty good ways to, slap a duo down. Yeah, no, I quite like it. Nothing much to say. If you've sort of seen the Squallow in other places, it's not doing anything new in Varuna. But yeah, I do think my preferred setup would be the multi-HMG NCO with the Pathfinder drone bot. You've got in Veruna, you've got a lot of heavy machine guns, but you don't have any AP heavy machine guns. So the Squallow actually does fill a pretty nice role, where otherwise you're taking for your buck orcs, which it is fine, but it is only burst 3, and that can let you down sometimes. So having the Squallow, just be very cheap unit, very cheap duo that's suddenly getting you a bajillion orders, really not bad at all. Speaking of the Pathfinder drone bot, here it is. And look, yeah, as you can see, there's no FTO. You can just take the TechWare bot, slap it to something really nice. Sensor's always going to be good. It's sort of a little bit awkward where the Kamau has sort of become sensor botted in a way, where it's picked up forward observer, it's picked up sensor, it's picked up triangulated fire. So you're really taking this for the tack aware and the speed, I think. So it doesn't necessarily have as much of a place. Potentially with Orcs or Camus, it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. But with, say, a Knight of Montesa, with a motorized Knight of Montesa, or with a Squallow, I think it's still a really, really nice pick. You get AVA2 Sierra drone bots, which is quite nice. Um, the Thunderbolt's really great. It's just a question of, is it something you're realistically going to take when you have access to Helots and other defensive elements? I think the answer is yes, but I don't think you'll see 2. I think you'll see 1. Some factions, like Svalheima, are very blessed by the AVA2 Sierra drone bot. I don't think this is one that's going to be blessed by the drone bot, though they do have access to them. Again, the Clipper, you can link the FTO, but it's not something that's going to be a big deal for the faction. You will potentially take Guided as a strategy in Veruna. You could kind of do it in N4, again with the Croc Men, but here with pitchers, with fast pandas, it is something you can do, which can be exciting as a Pano player, where you don't usually get the opportunity to do that. AVA2 Fugazi, nice to have. Then the Bulleteers. So these guys can link in a couple ways, really just into cavalry fire teams. You can either sort of put a heavy shotgun bot with the Squallow, just to project, a bit of threat there, or you can just pop the Spitfire with a specialist Nana Montesa, and that's probably preferred to, just having the Nana Montesa Red Fury or multi-rifle, if you don't care too much about the special die. So, yeah, nice little piece, not going to complain about it. And here's your AVA1 Peacemaker. And I think AVA1, that is what you had in previous Veruna as well. But I think it's very purposeful in trying to limit the potential of the network that Veruna can put out. In a lot of games, I've played a lot with the Peacemakers. It's no secret. I think they're absolutely fantastic. But it can be hard just to find space for two on the table. So AVA1, really don't mind. I'm always drawn to the Mine Layer option, 24-point Mine Layer, where you get the Peacemaker who's a repeater. He throws out that Orcs bot with the heavy flamethrower, and then the Orcs bot is the one with the Mine Layer. So you can either layer yourself really well, where you're going Mine, then bot, then Peacemaker. So there's essentially two rolls for your opponent to make before they even get access to the Peacemaker. And then potentially have to deal with a heavy shotgun, and hey, maybe they've been spotlighted at that point, who knows? Otherwise, you can do a really wide spread across the table, where putting all these guys 8 inches apart, you're going to be able to get a really good defensive net, kind of across part of the table. Really great pieces. Pal bots are pal bots, mule bots are mule bots, and then Croc Men. So Croc Men, they really had one niche, which was the forward observer profile. The niche here was it could put out a deployable repeater without being a hacker itself. So it could happily go in, drop a deployable repeater to get your hacking network up, or to scalpel a piece, and then sort of go in, start killing, maybe press a button somewhere, who knows? But with fast pandas and pitchers now, I think they've really lost that niche. So, okay, we're not taking that profile. Let's have a look at some other profiles. You've got a Mine Layer boarding shotgun for 26 points with just shock mines. That's a bit expensive. You've got just a regular hacker. Hidden deployment hacker is nice. It's a way to protect your hacking net. But 33 points is butthole clenchingly expensive, I think. The multi-sniper rifle, it's a fine defensive piece. Sort of rings similar to the Trinitarian, but you're paying for a lot of skills you're not using, and 29 points, a full 1.5 Swix, quite a lot. And then you're never going to pay 25 points for just the vanilla Croc Men boarding shotgun. So unfortunately, I think the Paradiso Croc Men have died their second death, where I no longer think they'd really have a niche, which was this FO profile. Very sad to see. They're very cool models, very cool kind of lore and unit as a whole. But yeah, that's a bit of a shame. So after taking a look at everything they've got to offer, let's take a look at a couple lists. So here we are, back with a couple lists for Veruna. And the first list I've got here, kind of called Old Gold, it's sort of an N5 translation to how I used to like playing Veruna in N4. So we've got a Haris team here, where we've got the Orc Feuerbach as our main gun. This is a very flexible gun that can be used inactive or in ARO, and is also great for armor busting as well. We've also got the Orc multi-rifle Tin Botnik 3. This is a good unit just to close assault with, and giving that firewall to the rest of the units in that team is really, really handy. And then sort of rounding that out is the Kamau hacker with submachine gun and fast panda. And this is a really nice little stealthy, quick fire team that can get a lot done. You can push up, you can throw out that fast panda for hacking, or you can just go in with the multi-rifle. You can shoot arrow pieces with the Feuerbach along the way. And if you're going second, you're very happy just to stand up that Feuerbach. It's unlikely he'll get completely blown off the table in one order. But then even if he does, you've got a pretty functional little duo going on over here. So this is a really nice Haris team. I think it's one I'm going to return to and one I can't wait to give a shot. Then we've got the Zulu-Cobra Killer Hacker with the picture. I think this is just one, you know, it was a staple before. It's a staple now. And then I've sort of tried reconstructing a little bit of a core here with the Fusiliers. So you've got your lieutenant and your decoy. You've got your hacker. So you've got, a nice little 2 hackers if someone jumps in your network. And then you've got the Kamau MSV2 multi-sniper, who you can put up on arrow if you're feeling confident, or sort of from turn 2 or 3 when a few more threats have been cleared. But you've also got the FTO Red Fury in here as well, which is really nice just to be able to jam in with some Fusiliers to get that burst bonus. And, you can put him up a little bit more reliably. So, Group 2, we've got a Kamau heavy machine gun with a Machinist armed turret. I think the armed turrets are funny. Just being able to support that Peacemaker as well is going to be really nice. A Pathfinder drone bot just for a little bit of tech. Now, the more reasonable thing really is to downgrade the Pathfinder drone bot to sound like a tech B and upgrade this Machinist to one of the more techy Kamau pieces, like the Forward Observer, or even the Paramedic, or even just Quinn as well with his Disco Ballers. That's the reasonable thing to do. But I thought I'd put it in nonetheless. Then we've just got 2 little camo helots rounding the team out and giving you that marker state helot goodness. Although, the FTO is really powerful, having that camo state's great just to guaranteed waste that second order. I think that's still something you want to do. So that's sort of a very old style of Veruna in a way that's been updated to N5. But kind of looking more towards here, we get a little bit more experimental. So we've taken a core here, including Patsy Garrett, with a Helot Red Fury, a Helot submachine gun light rocket launcher, Patsy Garrett in there to make them both regular, and then a Kamau HMG just to put an active gun to top that off. It'll be interesting to see how this sort of link performs, because it's sort of the kind of link that Patsy incentivizes you to make. Maybe that kind of whole 4 team is going to end up being too cumbersome. We'll just have to see. We've taken a war core here because you're making these other funky fellas regular. And, also worthy to note, Patsy is a warhorse. So it's not like someone can just hack and isolate Patsy and then suddenly the team falls apart. It's a pretty reliable way to turn those irregulars into regular. So we've got a war core in here just because we're not as worried about that irregular expenditure. Then we've got a really nice little Haris team that sort of rings a bit like this one over here, where you've got the Varuna Division Feuerbach, the multi-rifle Tinbot, and then the Knight of Montesa FTO. Now, one thing you could do here, you could switch the Tinbot for the hacker, just to kind of get a little bit more protection there. But this is a cool way to utilize the Knight of Montesa FTO. I really can't wait to get him on the table. And then Group 2, we've got the Kamau MSV Level 2 in a duo with that beautiful, beautiful triangulated fire forward observer sensor. Then we've got a Zulu-Cobra Lieutenant. Again, he's just very efficient on slots and what he does. You're not having to sort of set up this cumbersome sort of minimum 3 slot thing to get a decent LT on the table. The Zulu-Cobra is really great in that way. We've got another free range Helot, and then just 2 Fugazi drone bot to round out the list. So this is very much, I don't know, I guess the way I like to play Veruna, with lots of Orcs and lots of Kamau, but you can make a ton of great lists. I'm very excited to, just have a few free range Knights of Montesa in a list. I'm very excited just to chuck that very cheap Squallow and Sensor bot, just as a really good tag list. I think there's a lot to do in Veruna, and I think it's really cool how they've updated it. So I had a few predictions on Veruna in one of the prediction videos I did, and I'm interested to sort of mark myself in a sense. So I was wrong in the sense that vanilla wouldn't get affected. vanilla has been affected quite heavily by these changes, where really they've picked up this Zulu-Cobra hacker with picture, and they've also got a blocker hacker with BS12 but X-Visor picture as well, and they've picked up the Guard di Assalto. So I was wrong in that respect. I do think Kamau is still pretty excellent, but I did not expect the amount of reworking that would happen with these new armies. I think that was definitely a prediction I got wrong, but I'm very happy to be wrong. So, do let me know what you think in the comments. I think this is incredibly exciting. I will be trying my best to cover all the new sectorials coming out, and Infinity the Dante Varuna Immediate Reaction Division forever.